I fished 100 tournaments with FLW before they became Major League Fishing, and this is what I learned about fishing tournaments and what it takes to do well on that day. You know, we can all go out on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, sometime during the week or when there's not a lot of boats on the water, and catch bass. That's not what makes you great at tournament fishing. What makes you great at tournament fishing is going out and catching them on that specific day. So the first thing that I learned was my biggest surprise was what you see on TV. Guys winding something around, fishing with big baits, aggressive stuff, exciting things, is rarely how it happens in tournaments. You're seeing those guys use those baits because they're in the top 10. They're doing really well. They've got it figured out better than anyone else, and they're catching fish at will. Most of the time, you're not going to will your way through bass fishing. You've just got to take what you can get. So most of the time in tournaments, it's dragging something, fishing slow, some type of presentation that is boring, takes a lot of patience. That's where most of the money's made. What you're seeing on TV is just a small group of the entire tournament. Most of the guys made money, did well, caught fish, fishing slow, being monotonous, doing things that most of us don't like to do. That's what typically pays in bass fishing. Finessing, dragging, and just being more patient than everyone else. The second thing I learned about bass fishing is that you really have to be smart, because at the end of the week, if you did bad, it's pretty obvious what you did. You did something dumb, and this isn't a learning curve that you can just figure out day by day. It's something that sometimes takes years. So what I mean by that, let's just say for a specific instance, the first time you go to a lake, you don't practice the whole lake, you stay in one creek. Now, that's not a great way to tournament bass fish. You really got to go seek out the best bite, use the entire lake to your advantage, and don't paint yourself into the corner by just fishing one creek. But for this instance, let's just say you fished that one creek and you did really well in that creek. You caught a good bag of fish. Let's say you made some money, you did well in that tournament. Well, the next time you go to that lake, you say, I'm smarter. I know that I need to use the whole lake and go figure out the best possible area. So you fish the entire lake. Let's say you get a few bites in that creek that you did well in last time, but you're saying, no, I know better than that. I know that you don't go and try to do what you did last time. I'm going to venture out and go fish somewhere else. You go fish somewhere else, you do horrible in the tournament. So then you're saying, hey, sometimes you catch them, sometimes you don't. Me not fishing in that creek that I did well in last time wasn't the reason I did bad in this tournament. And you're right. That's not why you did bad in the tournament. But just hear me out. So the next time you go, you spend half of your tournament in that creek that you did well in, and then half somewhere else in the lake. You did well when you were fishing in the creek. And then when you left the creek, you did bad. So now you've been to this lake 3 times. Maybe this was over a course of 5 or 6 years. And you've figured out that, man, every time that I leave this creek, it goes south. It goes bad. Things get worse. When I stay in the creek, things happen. I do well. And let me explain what is happening. It's not because you know a lot of good spots in that creek. It's because I've had success there, so I'm just doing what I know, blah, blah, blah. It's not necessarily that. What it may be is that specific creek that you've always done well in just has way more fish in it than anywhere else in the lake. There's a bigger concentration of fish that live in that creek than anywhere else in the lake. And if it's one of those lakes where there's a bunch of dead water, it's hard to navigate, you go into this area of the lake, no one ever does well there. You go here, you may have a good day one day, but it's just very inconsistent. You go up there 2 days in a row, you're fishing a multi-day tournament, you're never going to be able to duplicate a good day in that part of the lake. So that's one of those things that I learned that, from the Bass Fishing 101 book. You're never supposed to go back and try to catch your same fish year after year. But don't trick yourself into thinking that that's a really good area. You might have to catch them a different way. You might have to fish differently, but there are staples in this game, specific lakes, where there's just an area of the lake that always produces. You always catch them. And it's because there's, for some reason, who knows why, there's just a bigger concentration of fish in that creek. And when you get out of that part of the lake, it's a whole different ballgame. And I'm not saying that every check and most of the success is going to come from that one area, because there are guys that are going to figure out how to catch them all over the lake. But for somebody who's learning something about a lake, sometimes you don't learn the whole lake. You're just going to learn a specific area, and it might take you going to that lake 3 or 4 or 5 times, 6 or 7 years, year after year, different times of the year, different seasons, different patterns. And it all comes back to every time I stay in that creek, I do well. And every time I leave, I do bad. And that's the only thing that I know about this lake. Stay in the creek, figure it out. That's something that I've learned. Now, strengths and weaknesses, that's a big thing in fishing. And this is one that doesn't get talked about enough, I feel like. Now, yes, strengths are very important. And if you have weaknesses, you want to try to stay away from those on tournament day, because tournament day, things are going to go sideways. The fishing is going to get tough. The fishing pressure from the week is going to accumulate, and the bite is going to slow down. So your strengths, a bait that you can keep in your hand for hour after hour without getting bites, is very important. But let me dial into that a little bit further. Now, you want to have strengths that are hard to duplicate by other anglers overnight. And what I mean by that, there are techniques out there where any specific angler can't just pick it up and learn how to do it in a day or two. So if you're fishing a tournament, let's say on the Coosa River, and you've never been there before, if your strengths are swimming a jig, you're really good at swimming a jig, there's most likely going to be a way that you do well there. Because swimming a jig is one of those deals where you got to kind of know how to do it and do it correctly. You can't just pick up a swim jig and go fishing. You can, and that works sometimes, but there's a lot of different ways to do that. You got to be doing the Alabama shake. Maybe you need to put a swim bait on there and fish it a little bit deeper in the water column. Maybe you have to be good about fishing around docks, things like that. You have to have a strength that not anybody can do. So that's one of those things, and there's so many different ways to look at that. Like, for instance, cranking grass, maybe throwing like a biffle bug. There's just so many different, like on a hard head, there's just so many techniques out there where it's not like a shaky head where you just pick it up and throw it on rocks, drag it around, you get a lot of bites, so it's easy to be confident with it. There are techniques where you don't get a lot of bites, you don't get that feeling from the fish that you're doing it right. So learning strengths are important, but learn the ones that are hard to learn. And this takes time. You want to give yourself years to learn a technique, but when you have that in your back pocket and can pull it out, you know that all the other fishermen in your tournament aren't going to be able to just duplicate it and kill that bite by the excess fishing pressure. You know you're going to be one of few people doing it. So learn some strengths that only you know how to do. Try those three things, guys, and good luck to you guys. I'll see you on the water.